Guys, so today I am going to show you guys kind of the thought process when I think about factoring, okay? So usually um, a lot of people have a lot of different methods on how to factor, but I just want to show you kind of how I go about factoring, okay? So first of all, let's talk about the goal of factoring, okay? So let's say we had this function. And usually when you're talking about factoring, at first you're talking about uh, squared functions or quadratic functions, right? So let's say we had x squared um, minus, let's see, try to make this up on the spot, minus x minus 6. I think that one's going to be a good one. Okay, so let's say we had this function right here, right? So of course this would be like f of x or whatever, right? F of x equals all this junk, right? So the goal of factoring is pretty much you want to be able to separate this function into two smaller, I guess you could say functions, but it's not really two separate functions. It's a product of two terms, I guess. So in other words, you would get something like this, like x plus or minus some number times x plus or minus some number over here. Okay, so if you didn't know what it means to factor, if you see this, you probably kind of get an idea. But either way, let's kind of go through the process that I go through when I think about factoring. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So first of all, uh, today we're going to go over factoring things that only are with a coefficient of 1 right here. Okay, so in other words, there's no number in front of this x squared. And we're also assuming that these are factorable, okay? There's no square roots involved or no imaginary numbers or anything like that. So uh, when we want to factor this, the way I started off is that I know that I'm going to have um, two multiplying terms, right? So since they are multiplying right here, so um, since this is just going to be x squared, I know that my first two terms do have to be x and x, right? So when we multiply this out, you should get back what your original uh, function was, right? So when I multiply x times x, that of course will give me my x squared back, okay? So that's why I automatically just fill those out, okay? So we're pretty much almost done. All we need to figure out is the plus, the sign, and then of course the number that would correspond here. So the next thing I would do is I want to figure out, well, um, what I want to figure out next is the numbers that are going to go there, okay? So for that, we got to look at, still getting used to this by the way. We're going to look at this number right here, okay? So let's look at the factors of 6. So we're pretty much asking ourselves what two numbers multiply to give us 6, okay? So we are going to have 1 times 6, obviously, right? We have 2 times 3, and that's pretty much it, right? There's no other numbers that multiply to give us 6. Um, so from there, we can kind of guess that, well, we're either going to use this pair right here or this pair right here, okay? So we at least know that we know either a 1 or a 6 is going to go here, or a 2 and a 3, okay? So in order to figure that part out, though, we need to kind of look at the middle term, right? So we see here that we have a negative number, right? Or we have a negative 1, pretty much, right? I'll just put a little 1 right there. So our goal is to look at our factors of 6 and see which two numbers are more likely going to give us this negative 1 right here, okay? So in other words, will 1 and 6 ever add up to give us a negative 1? Or subtract, if you look at it that way. No, right? There's no way. Like, even if I had 6 minus 1, that gives me 5. If I had 1 minus 6, that gives me a negative 5. So either way we do it, we don't get a negative 1. But let's see if we do 2 minus 3, that gives us a negative 1. Well, and then if we do 3 minus 2, that gives a positive 1, right? Well, remember, our goal is to get a negative 1 right here, so we know that we are going to use the 2 and 3, and we also know which case we want it to be, right? So right here, we want to make sure that the 3 is going to be negative, and we want to make sure that the 2 is positive, okay? So if that doesn't make too much sense, we'll do a couple more examples. Hopefully the video's not too long. Pretty much I know that my 2 is going to be positive, so I'll just go ahead and come over here and fill this information out. So it's going to be plus 2, and over here I'm going to go and then put minus 3. And then we could double check our work, and the way you could do that is by factoring that out. So all I do is distributing, I'm sorry. All I do is take this first one, and I'm going to multiply it by x, and then multiply it by negative 3. So then I get x squared from the first two, then x times negative 3 gives me negative 3x. And then once I'm done with that, I just move on to the next term, so I have positive 2. So I'm going to multiply 2 times x. That gives me plus 2x. Then I'm going to multiply my 2 and my negative 3, which gives me negative 6. Okay? So you can see already that it almost looks just like this original one. So we're probably right. And the only thing is that the middle term is not the same yet, right? But that could easily be fixed. We just have to combine these terms right here, right? So when we do combine them, we get negative 3 plus 2. Well, we saw right here that that would give us negative 1. So we would get negative x, and then this negative 6 just goes here. And you can see that we exactly got this equation that we first had, okay? So that's an easy way to check to see if you are correct. If you end up getting something different, you know you did something wrong, and you got to recheck all the numbers that you did. So we know that the factorized form of that first polynomial is going to end up being x plus 2 times x minus 3. Okay? So this is what we talk about when we're factoring, when we're talking about factoring quadratic functions, okay? There's other types of factoring. This isn't the only way, but we'll discuss that a little bit more as we go, okay? Let's just do one more quick example. That way you guys kind of have a better idea of what's going on. So let me just make one up real quick. Let's say we had x minus 1. Let's see. Okay, so let's say we had this polynomial function x squared plus 2x minus, oops, it's like really off, minus 3. Okay, so let's start off with just doing our little parentheses, right? That's all we got to really do. So first we have, we're just going to fill out our x's, right? That's the first thing we do. There's no number in front of here, so we know there's just going to be x times x. So boom, we're already done there. Now we just got to focus on the numbers. Another trick you can also do is pay attention to the sign right here. If you notice that it's a negative sign, well, you know that these two numbers right here, they need to multiply in a way that would get you a negative, right? So in other words, we know that this number is going to be a negative and this number is going to be a positive. So we could even fill that out pretty fast because we know this needs to be a negative 3. So we know that whatever this number is, it needs to be negative, and whatever this number is, it has to be positive, so that we get the resulting negative number there. Okay? So next thing we can do is we're going to go through the factors of 3. Well, there's only one factor pair, which is 3 times 1, since 3 is a prime number, right? So we know we're going to have to use this. Now it's just a matter of figuring out which one's going to be positive and which one's going to be negative. So for that, we look to the middle one. So we have positive 2x, right? So we know that the bigger number should be the positive number, right? because we need to eventually have a leftover of positive. So I know I'm going to put my 3 here and my 1 here. And let's just double check real quick just to make sure that everything's fine. So we do x times x, that gives us x squared. X times 3 gives us plus 3x. Then we do negative 1 times x gives us negative x. And then negative 1 times 3 gives us a negative 3. Once we combine all like terms, we can see that we do end up getting our same equation back. Okay, so this would be the correct form to factor this. Okay, awesome. So make sure you guys make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe for more videos.